And then doing, I was letting them know that you'll be monitoring the chats and providing questions, etc. to them.
Yeah. Yes, totally.
And then doing, I was letting them know that you'll be monitoring the chat.
Oh Lord, we're live.
We're live.
I'm sharing my screen. Good evening, everybody. I think it is evening some places, and some places we still have the sun a little bit up in the sky. I want to welcome you to our Sunday JAMINARS. And this Sunday, we're featuring two JAMINARs. One of them is teacher burnt out, and we're trying to highlight some areas where teacher can be burnt out. And I'm thinking that other people, not just teachers, but administrators, can get some takeaways from this. Okay, and then the other one that we're featuring later on this evening is reading strategies versus reading skills. What's the difference? And I think quite a lot of our teachers will benefit really, really well from these. Okay, the reading strategies. The first JAMINAR that is coming up is teacher burnout, and of course it's evening time, mostly in Jamaica, and so you have the chance to sit down, maybe get a cup of tea or carrot juice, maybe right after we eat our Sunday dinner. You know, the traditional Sunday dinner in Jamaica, and just sit down and have a pen and paper to jot down some of these strategies. More than likely reflect on our own development as professionals. Okay, so I am here with the esteemed pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Dakers. Okay, and Dr. Sharika Dakers, she actually is Jamaican. She's Jamaican, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself once I hand over to her. But I'm very, very fascinated by her background and also what she's going to be sharing with us this afternoon. So Dr. Sharika Dakers is an author. She's a researcher also, and she's also a scholar whose work examines the phenomenon of teacher burned out. Not much research is on this, teacher burned out. Okay, Dr. Dakers' ongoing research seeks to better understand the impact of burnout so as to move towards sharing and implementing actionable steps to decrease teachers' experiences of being burnt out. We want to know, other than, you know, like smoking or drinking or so on, what else in a productive way we can, you know, grab the bull by the horn. That's what we want to do. Dr. Dakers is also a prominent advocate for educational equity and the teacher preparation programs. She recently published her first book, and it's called, write this down, this is your first writing point. Her first book is called Death by Burnt Out, Education's Dirty Little Secret. That's what it's called, Death by Burnt Out, Education's Dirty Little Secret. You might want to check it out because it is #1 on Amazon's list, new book release list, and also a bestseller. So you might want to check that out. One of her most recent research publications can also be found in the Clearinghouse Journal, and the title is "Why They Struggle to Stay. Black Women Educators Reflect on the State of Teachers." And this day and age really calls for that. You might want to check this out also. The Clearinghouse Journal, the Clearinghouse is a journal publication company, and the title of this journal is "Why They Struggle to Stay, Staying in the Profession. Black Women Educators Reflect on the State of Teachers." Dr. Dakers is a data scientist and an adjunct professor of psychology. Okay, I'm handing over to Dr. Dakers so that she can talk to us a little bit about herself and then dig into this phenomenon, teacher burnout. Dr. Dakers.
Thank you, guys. You made me sound extra. Here.
Dr. Dakers, your audio is coming in echoing.
Okay,
if you want to.
figure that out. 1 second. Is it still echoing on your end?
Yeah, it is. It's really,
Let's see
really.
what's going on here. Hold on.
Yeah, you might want to click on the audio button a little bit more. Or even if you have to restart and come again.
Okay, let's try that.
Yeah. I think we have some audio but we're gonna get it right from the start here, everybody. This one is, as I was saying earlier on, it's very important that you pay attention to this because many teachers over the years I've seen who have had click on the audio button with burnt out, with burnt out, problems with burnt out. Even sometimes myself have to take a step back and probably sleep for an entire day. Dr. Dickers, are you ready?
Let's try this one more time. Am I still echoing?
Oh, it's perfect.
You know the trick, Dr. Dice. I would not think of that one. I'll run for my headphones or something that would be okay. Now I know.
Yes. It's perfect. So I'm handing. You ready?
I am ready.
Totally. Yes, ever ready. All right. I'm handing over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you once again, Dr. Dice, for that introduction. And I want to say thank you to JDTAN for this opportunity to be on this platform, this stage, to share my research, my knowledge with regards to teacher burnout, and to be able to impart, as a person who's an agent of change, impart information and content to fellow educators, and not only educators, but other individuals who are in the working profession. So when I do talk about and present this evening, please know that this afternoon, it knows that it's not only for educator, but as an educator, I'm coming from that foundation. So I'm going to share my screen for a little bit and talk a little bit about who I am. Who is Sharika Dakers? Who is Sharika Dakers? So first of all, I want to say that, as Dr. Dice mentioned, I am an author, and he mentioned the book. Yes, it's called Death by Burnout. It's now on Amazon, and as was mentioned, was a #1 new release book and bestseller. So throughout this presentation, you'll hear me make reference to the book or to several reflection on participants' feedback based on my research that I'll talk about to serve as an additional resource and foundation for what I'll be sharing with you. Additionally, I am an educator. I have been in this profession for now 17 years. I think I lost track, which is not bad at all, but I have been a classroom educator. I've also been an instructional coach, intervention specialist, and go on and on. Currently, I am a data scientist. Education running my family, it's the foundation. I grew up listening to and watching my mother, who is from Trelawney, Jamaica, Dorothy Murray, as an educator and a principal, and other family members and close friends who are educators then and now in this profession. So it's a part of who I am. I'm a researcher, and I've been researching teacher burnout for over 10 years. And, interestingly, individuals who are researchers, they tend to research topics that are close to their heart or that they have gone through experiences. And when I first started out this topic or digging into the literature when it comes to teacher burnout, that was because I was experiencing these symptoms. And I honestly could not put my finger on what it was. And it wasn't until I got into the literature and I read more and talked to fellow colleagues that I was able to attach a name to my symptoms, to what I was feeling. And for me, as a person who's all about, going into seeing the problem, making sure I'm aware of the problem, but going into finding out resolutions for problems, I decided to step into the research and understand more about what is this phenomenon, such as burnout. I'm also a scholar and an agent of change. I strongly believe that, I'm positioned in this role. My talent that's given to me is to support and empower others. And that is through knowledge, imparting knowledge. I always say when it comes to knowledge, empowering knowledge is an individual empowers them to be powerful and to be active, to be knowledgeable as to how they're able to, better themselves and to move on from there. So this is about who I am. I want to say, as Dr. Dice mentioned, yes, I am from Jamaica. My foundation when it comes to education is from Jamaica. So I want to say hello to everyone who's joined, who is from Albertown, Jamaica. Trelawney, if you're in the house, welcome, welcome, welcome. I went to Albertown Primary and then to Albertown High School in Upper Trelawney. So for those of you who are joining in, hello, my family and friends. Thank you for being here this evening. For those of you who are from other parts of the beautiful beautiful island of Jamaica, welcome. Thanks for being here. And those who are from other areas here in the United States of America, and for those who are in other countries, thank you for being here and for joining me this afternoon for this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to dive into the topic this afternoon. Step back, reflect. Are you a victim of burnout? And I center on these words and I pause because as we go through, I'll have a little reflection time through my presentation that will allow you to step back and to reflect and to think about it. The information that I'm presenting to you, does that resonate with you? Are you a victim of burnout? And by the end of this session, you'll realize that I'm not only highlighting the problems or this phenomena, but I'm also, and will also share with you some intentional and practical strategies that you are able to implement so as to ensure that you are more efficient in reducing or avoiding becoming burnout. So this afternoon, I have 3 focus for my presentation. First, to identify the key causes of burnout, then to describe the negative impacts of burnout, and then finally explore those practical steps that you are able to implement to decrease or even to avoid becoming burnout as you go through your day-to-day interaction. So to get things started off, I am going to task you with an activity. And for this one, you will not need to share out any information. However, it will serve as a foundation as we go through this evening as to what I'm talking about. And you will have that opportunity to reflect on the information and to be able to efficiently go through and go from there. Okay, so let me go ahead and get that part started. So if you have a phone handy, if you can go ahead and just get that ready, I'll be asking you to take a screenshot or a snippet of of this slide that we're going to talk about, and to have that handy and also have your responses close to you because you'll be able to go back and reflect on those. So I will present a few statements for you, and you are able to respond to these statements by selecting every day, 2 to 4 days per week, at least 1 day per week, or not at all. So if the statements come up and you are able to respond to these, choose every day, 2 to 4 days per week, at least 1 day per week, or not at all. Okay, so here we go. Here's the first statement. Do you feel emotionally and physically drained at the end of the workday? Once again, you can respond by saying every day, or writing down, I should say every day, 2 to 4 days per week, at least 1 day per week, or not at all. Here's another. Do you wake up some work days and wish you did not have to go to work? Do you experience a lack of support from your colleagues and or administrators or supervisors? Do you become easily frustrated with your coworkers? And finally, do you go into work early or stay back late just to get caught up with your work tasks? Now, once again, you can take a snippet or screenshot of these statements. You can also take a picture of it if that works for you, but just have that handy. We'll reflect on those throughout the presentation, and you're able to have your responses close by, because as we go through, you may be able to say, okay, that is me, or that was me, if you have gone through that hump of becoming burned out, and go from there. So let's talk a little bit. When you hear the word or the term burnout, what image comes to mind, or what images come to your mind? What about this one? You tend to see fellow coworkers or colleagues, or maybe you, just that cloud, that dark cloud, heavy cloud going about, whether it's physically can see the strain in their eyes, in their body movement, or just verbal communication, just feeling like the burden, the weight of the world is on you? Or is it where you feel like a lot of things are coming at you all at once? You are just overwhelmed. You are loaded with a lot of information, of things that you have to get done in order for you to get your job task and duties completed. Do you feel like you just want to pull your hair out? Like, you just can't take it anymore. Or you've had enough. You have reached your breaking point and this is it. Some individuals may feel like they just want to disconnect, to separate themselves, want to be alone, isolation, withdraw from colleagues, for educators, from their students, from family members, just want to disconnect, not want to interact at all. Or it could be where if you do interact with them, you are cynical, you are critical, you are bitter, the statements you say are negative. Do you begin to question your self-worth or question the work you do? Are you good enough? Is this the right career for you, the right field for you? Are you being impactful? Or do you just want to scream? You are over it. You just want to get it out. You've had enough. Where are you? Or where were you? Burnout affects individuals from all professions, as I mentioned, but research shows that educators are the #1 group of individuals in this helping profession that's highly impacted by burnout. Yes, nurses or those in medical field are also impacted. Yes, law enforcement professionals are also impacted, among others. But when we think about educators, I oftentimes hear, wow, I do not know how you do it, or how educators put up with that. We as educators do go through a lot of responsibilities on our shoulders. So when we talk about and think about becoming burnout or the symptoms of burnout, it's important to understand that this is a phenomenon that requires our attention and requires actionable steps to ensure that our profession, those who are in this profession, stay in the profession to ensure that we carry on. So what is burnout? What is burnout? Take about 10 seconds, and I want you to read this definition by Maslow and Leiter as to what is burnout. So if your attention was drawn to the word psychological, was drawn to the word prolonged, or to the word chronic, stressors, well, it's not surprising that those words all come together to make up this definition of what burnout is. As individuals, there are times that when we become emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted, depleted, we tend to find ourselves gradually, sometimes unintentionally withdrawn from others, like I mentioned before, whether it's our colleagues or students or even our family members. And as stated before, we tend to question, why are we in this profession? Are we being impactful? Becoming burned out doesn't off the back happens. You may have some symptoms here and there, on and off, but it is a gradual and ongoing process that is also prolonged. So I want you to remember this definition, and I'll talk about it in our other slides, but I want you to also think about these words or phrases that make up the definition: psychological syndrome, prolonged, chronic, stressors on the job. Now, Maslow mentioned 3 dimensions of burnout as a part of the definition. When a person is burned out, this individual has symptoms and feelings of increased emotional exhaustion, right? And the pictures I showed you earlier, if you think about those pictures, I saw those pictures and automatically I'm like, whoa, I kind of feel the energy or feel, what's going on based on that picture or those pictures, right? Being exhausted, being overwhelmed, that burden, that pressure. Another part of being burned out, you have increased withdrawal. I mentioned this previously, from your students, for those who are educators, from your coworkers, from your colleagues, even from your family members. And yes, it does, your experience of burnout does transition over to your family members. But not only that, you now have a decreased sense of personal accomplishment, where you begin to feel your thoughts are there, where you're thinking your work is not good enough. You question your self-efficacy. Am I good enough for this? Is it important? Is it impactful? And with that question, your motivation, your action to be an efficient educator or worker begins to be depleted. So I want to pause for a second and right here and allow you the opportunity just to reflect for about 15 seconds on the questions the statements I shared with you earlier, those 5 statements that you responded to. And just think about your responses. And based on the pictures I showed previously and the definition of someone who's burned out. And also take into consideration these 3 dimensions of burnout: increased emotional exhaustion, increased withdrawal, and decreased personal accomplishment. And in knowing this, just think a little bit, reflect on those. Have you experienced burnout? Or are you experiencing burnout? So you're probably wondering or already know, what are some of the key causes of burnout? What are some of those key factors that impacts burnout? In my research examining the differences in burnout scores among 2 groups of educators, the data collected show that 3 factors were top reasons or top factors, top causes of someone becoming burned out. An increased in a workload, decreased colleague or co-worker support, and decreased administrator or supervisor support. And for us educators, we possibly can put ourselves in that place and space as an educator, or those who are not from education background, those who are in the corporate world where you are working with others. If you think about it, when you do have an increase in your workload, how does that make you feel? Or if you do not have the support from your colleagues or administrator. So let's talk a little bit about those. So workload and its impact on burnout. Well, what does that look like? Increase in your work tasks. Here's one I mentioned before: emotionally depleted from all the work that you have to contend with. Oh, and here's a biggie: becoming overwhelmed. Yes, overwhelm can connect to becoming stressed. You're burdened, exhausted. Remember one of the statement before I said to you, do you feel exhausted, or, wake up and you're not thinking, I do not want to go to work at all? In my book, Death by Burnout, Education's Dirty Little Secret, as I mentioned before, in chapter 8, it details one of the participants who's an educator and his struggle with excessive workload and work strain. And I'm going to summarize what was shared in his story to me. He talked about how he got into the profession and he was excited, like we are all, right? We got into the profession, we're gonna change the world one child at a time. We're gonna make a difference. And he strongly believed, as us educators do, that we can make a difference. He was doing great. But for him, his struggle was not with his students or the parents. His struggle was with the amount of work that he had to get done. He talked about how there were a couple of times where he put off the opportunity and the requirement for him to get help when it comes to his medical or physical health. He would schedule appointments and he would have a time, half a day of work, and he would take the time off. But because he became so overwhelmed with the work task, he would reschedule. And for him, he just wanted to make sure he was doing the best for himself and his learners. And that did not always turn out to be in his best interest, because for him, what happened was that he became burned out. And after a while, he began to resent his profession. He resented becoming a teacher. He found that the work he was doing while he was trying to do great for his learners, the workload was totally taking over his life. That was a problem for him. Later on in this chapter, he shared how, with help from his colleagues and support in how to effectively get through this, he was able to stay in this field of education and weather the storm of burnout and continue on. So when we talk about being burnout, just reflect on the workload you have, and we'll talk about those a little bit further on. A second key cause is a lack of support. Now, you just heard me mention this particular educator in my research. I talk about, even though he was going through all this workload and the amount of tasks he had to get done, the many hats and duties and responsibilities that he had, he was able to find support in his colleagues. The lack of support from your colleagues can definitely impact you in this profession, in your profession, whatever that may be in this public service arena. It leads to isolation and withdrawal. You may become to feel like you do not belong. You're not wanted, you're not needed there. Talk about decrease in job performance. You go in, but the drive that you have to work initially has slowly depleted because you're not getting the support from your colleagues and your supervisor or your administrator. Now, when we talk about lack of support, it is deemed to be one of the most frequent reported reasons for teachers, us educators, for leaving the profession completely or just changing work location. The work environment that you're in and the workload that one may experience in one environment may totally be different from somewhere else. So for some educators, they decide just to leave altogether completely. Others, just a change of work location, the environment can make a big difference. So as the research shows, teachers are leaving mass exodus every year. And for those of you, whether you're in Jamaica, in the United States, or in other Caribbean countries or other countries in general, just think about it. How many years and have you gone through your profession? Each year you hear off, or you may know someone directly, you say, you know what, this is it for me. I'm throwing the towels. I'm finished, right? Or the school year start and there's not a credible, let me use that word, or a professional person who has gone through the formalization of being in the classroom to teach a content area. That happens all the time. So when we talk about the lack of support from colleagues or from your supervisors, that is what we're talking about, how that can negatively impact educators, this profession, and even our learners. I saw this quote recently, and it kind of, when we talk about lack of support, it kind of stuck with me a little bit. This and many others, but this one stuck to me. It says, one piece of log creates a small fire. Just one log, one person. It's adequate to warm you up, right? Add just a few more pieces to blast an immense bonfire, large enough to warm up your entire circle of friends. Needless to say that individuality counts, but teamwork, support, having each other's back, so to speak, does go a far way. Does go a long way. So whether it is support in your social area, your personal area, your family life, or even professionally, having that support, having that camaraderie is important in order to avoid or decrease becoming burned out. So what are other factors influencing burnout? Here are 3 other factors, and there may be others that you're thinking about. 1, having unclear job expectations. You go into the profession or you accept a job and you have many titles or many roles or many hats to wear, right? So having that clear expectation is important. So you know what's required of you, preventing you from stretching yourself too thin and being able to perform your optimal best. The second, dysfunctional workplace dynamics. And when I want to pause for a second, because I've seen this word dysfunctional either on TV, in movies, or just hearing it in a mental health arena, dysfunctional. So when you think about a workplace that's dysfunctional, what comes to mind? Just think about what comes to mind. What do you envision? What do you see? What are you hearing? What's resonating with you? What comes to mind? Dysfunctional workplace environment or dynamics. Well, 1, feeling undermined by your colleagues. Feeling that you're constantly being sabotaged. Nothing that you do is good enough. You know, it's like you can climb the mountain, you can put in 24 hours straight, and what you did was not good enough. You feel like you are alone, you are just isolated. That dysfunction in the workplace can definitely cause someone to begin to succumb to those symptoms of being burnt out. Feel like someone is constantly just stabbing you in the back, so to speak, or not even taking you serious, not seeing you, not recognizing you, not validating what you are doing. How about this? Being verbally or emotionally attacked. The way your colleagues speak to you, the way your advisors or supervisors speak down to you or speak at you. This can definitely contribute to someone feeling or succumbing to those symptoms of burnout. Constantly being thinking on the edge, what's next? What will I do next that will definitely let this person, my colleague or my supervisor, my administrator, just go off? The third one is that work-life imbalance, where you're on that scale and you know your work life is so heavy that you do not have, it takes up so much of your time, you do not have the capacity or the amount of hours in the day to even squeeze out an ounce of time, half an hour, a little bit of time to cater to your needs, your wants, physically, emotionally, mentally. I don't know, you know, just to share a little bit, having gone through being burnt out, it can be very tasking. It can be very tasking and very overwhelming to go through being burnt out. So what are some other factors? Just very, you know, just reflect, think about what are some other factors that you are able to put a pin on, to touch, say, these are things that has led to me, you becoming burned out, or someone else you may know. You can just jot those down. And while you're writing those down for the next 5 seconds, 10 seconds, just reflect, okay, were you able to overcome it? Were you able to get through it? Were you able to go up the mountain? And then now you're able to go down because you've gone through, you now have a way and ability to basically get through these obstacles when it comes to burnout. Just think about that. So you are burned out. We talk about what is burnout. We talk about those key causes of burnout, those stressors in the environment. We talk about the ongoing, prolonged things that led to someone becoming burned out. right? We talk about how these key factors can be some that are the work-life imbalance, dysfunctional work dynamics. We talk about those. So now we have an idea, foundation, and a better understanding as to what is burnout. Let's talk about this. What are those signs of burnout? And this is where I want you as viewers out there just to look at these three columns: physical, emotional, behavioral. And I want you to read through these bullet points and just pluck out a couple of these points that you can say, yeah, I kind of have felt that. Or, well, my colleague, my coworker mentioned that. Just take about 10 seconds. And I want you to just look through these three different signs of burnout that one can succumb to. Okay. So as I go through the next about 5 minutes talking about these signs, I want you to jot down somewhere for each of these signs of burnout, one that you can say without a doubt resonates with you. Just any one bullet point from physical, one bullet point from emotional, one from behavioral. Just have that written down somewhere. So physical. The statements I shared with you earlier for you to respond to every day, 2 to 4 days per week, 1 day or not at all. We're going to make some connection right now, once again, with those statements, right? We're going to make some connection to the definition of burnout once again. And we are going to make some connection to those 3 dimensions I mentioned to you for someone that's burned out. Increased emotional exhaustion, increased withdrawal, or depersonalization is also called. And then that decrease in physical accomplishment, where you question your self-efficacy, your ability to perform your tasks efficiently. So let's talk about physical. Feeling tired and drained most of the time. We mentioned that before, right? Bullet point number 2 says lowered immunity, frequent illnesses. Now, have you gone through days of working maybe 9-10 hours and maybe getting 5 hours of sleep or less consistently? What begins to happen to your body? Develop a cold, body ache, headaches. These are all physical signs that individuals who begin to succumb to those symptoms of burnout begin to have. I mentioned frequent headaches. So if you're someone that have chronic headaches before you got into education or your profession, and it's something that's the norm for you, and with medical supervision and help, you're able to get through that as best as possible, that's different. But if you are someone in the helping professions that when you get to the job, when you pull up and you step through those doors and start working, those small little begins to happen, those headaches, the shoulders starting to hurt, the tense in your body, muscle pain. It's ongoing. You can pinpoint sometimes exact times or place or individuals you're around that tends to trigger these physical signs. You may have experienced symptoms of burnout. You may be going through being burned out. A change in your appetite. You're so stressed and overwhelmed on a job that you begin to eat too much or not eat enough, losing weight, gaining weight. And once again, you can more than likely pinpoint those times and places. Change in your sleeping habits. I always say to myself, as educators, as individuals in helping profession, we are constantly thinking about something, the lesson plan, the observation, our students, our clients, our patients, right? We're constantly, it's like the never ending wheel in our brain, just going and going and going. You could be on the beach, relaxing at the pool, and you're still going, going and going. Is that you? Is that you? Emotionally, the sense of failure, and I mentioned this, that decreased personal accomplishment, feeling helpless or trapped. You're lacking that motivation. Normally, you know, when you first start a job, you were motivated. You're going to change the world. You're going to make a difference. You're going to be impactful. And it slowly begins to decrease. Or do you become cynical, negative? You know, the words you speak are so negative. Is that you? Have you been there? And then behavioral, your actions, your behavior. Now, I want to say oftentimes our emotions impact our behaviors and vice versa, right? Our negative thoughts and so forth does go in to impact how we act. So if we think we're not good enough and the work we're doing is not efficient or effective, well, our behaviors after a while, think about it. If you are hearing the same thing over and over constantly, after a while, you may kind of start to think that way. You may kind of start to act that way, right? Those behaviors. Isolating yourself. Taking out your frustrations on others. For us educators, our co-workers, our students, our behaviors. You know, when we think about our behaviors and our actions, and in just talking a little bit about as educators, you know, I always hear, and just from a biblical standpoint, you know, you have life and death in your tongue. Your tongue is so powerful. The words you say that comes out to those learners in front of you, whether they're primary school, middle school, high school, post-secondary, adults, your words, your tongue can impart things that are negative. How are your emotions based on being burned out impacting your behavior, your interaction with others? Just think about that. Burnout is a phenomenon that is real. It is real. And my study is not the only one that has, you know, shone the light on this phenomenon. There are other studies out there. But now that we know what it is and how it's happening, what are we going to do? What action will we impart in order for us to decrease our experiences of burnout or to avoid it? So, are you slowly unraveling? After talking about these physical signs and these emotional signs of burnout and behavior, are you slowly unraveling, telling yourself every day, oh, it's just stress, I'll get over it, this will pass, it's okay? Are you telling yourself that? And if so, for how long? And for how much longer will you continue to tell yourself that? You know, if you look at the picture with the zebra, when I saw this in creating my PowerPoint, I stopped for a second and I was just looking, you know, of course, all those lines that it goes all the way down to the back legs, and slowly it unravels. Think about yourself or someone you know, slowly begin to unravel. Emotionally, mentally, physically, you're unraveling. Or are you at that breaking point where, you know, I in the past, I used to say to myself, I'm this close to just losing it. Have you said that to yourself? I'm this close to losing it, you know, because the stressors in the work environment they have or had become so much, whether it's interaction with colleagues, administrators, supervisors, or the workload, to the point where you get to your breaking point and you are ready just to lose it. Is that you? I found these images and I think, at least for me and hopefully for you, it pinpoints visually what we tend to feel sometimes physically or tend to think about or experience emotionally, that breaking point. Yeah. Recognizing the warning signs of being burnout is important for your mental and physical well-being. It is essential. It is important. One of the participants in my book, she talked about her experience being in the classroom, and for her, it was not just one factor that led to her being burned out, right? But I think the that aha moment came when she suffered a physical ailment. It went from a pain in the leg, tense shoulders, headache, to being rushed to the hospital. And it's not that she wasn't aware of these symptoms, she was. It's just that the focus was not on the symptoms. She was busy. She was intentionally making sure that she's doing the best that she can for as long as she could to ensure that she makes sure her learners are learning. But for her, it transitioned to a physical ailment. So are you at your breaking point? What's next? If you are, what's next? Do you know what's the next step? Do you know what else you can do? Do you know how else you can resolve that? Okay. Well, there are practical steps to decrease or avoid becoming burnout. There are. Practical step means actionable steps. You're being intentional about what it is you need to focus on, and now you're putting your actions in place to decrease or avoid becoming burnout. So I'm going to pause for just a second, and I want you to think for a second. What have you done if you have gone through becoming burnout and you're getting to a place now where you're able to cope with those symptoms and be able to overcome them? What have you done? Jot down one or two things that you have done to cope with becoming burned out previously or even currently. Jot those down. One or two of those items, those steps you've taken. If you are going through it right now, where tomorrow morning you are like, oh, work again. What makes you get up out of bed, get ready, drive to, walk to, take the bus to get to your work location? What motivates you to get there? And jot that down. I want to share with you a few practical steps that I have found based on my research that has been impactful, and even also talking from a personal experience of practical steps that can help you avoid becoming burnout. Self-care. Self-care. Self-care is one of the most important aspects for individuals to be able to ward off those symptoms of burnout. But oftentimes our self-care is pushed to the side. Oftentimes we basically said, I'll do it later, or I'll take care of that later, right? Think about this. How many times have you sat at your desk, you're working on something, and you know it's lunchtime, you know it's time for you to get your lunch, and then becomes 11 a.m., midday, 1 p.m., and then it's time to get up to go home and your lunch is still there. All right. For those of you who have a smartwatch, like I do, how many times do you sit down and you get a little vibration? It's time to take a deep breath for 1 minute, right? And you probably hit snooze or ignore it, or you may be prompted to stand up. And you're so engulfed in what you're doing that you just blow it off. Self-care, being intentional about your self-care. One of the participants in my book made this statement, and he said, being selfish saved me from a state of emotional insanity. Think about that. Being selfish saved me from a state of emotional insanity. Selfish means that you are going to put the work on hold and just step away. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And I know you may have seen this statement before or I've read it, but it's the truth. You have to be selfish. You have to be mindful of your limits. You have to be able to say no. Say no and being intentional about saying no. Say no and be intentional about saying no. Burnout is what happens when we as individuals tend to basically forget, that we're humans as well for far too long. It continues. A second practical step that you can implement so as to ensure that you avoid becoming burnout or decreases, leave work at work. How many of us are like this image? We drag our work around with us. How many of us where we pack up our work items, put in the back of our trunk or the back seat or the front seat, wherever, get to our homes, pull it out, get home, interact with your family or relax for a little bit, and then we're back at it again, right? It just never ends. And before you know it, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're grading papers or doing lesson plan. And you only have 5 hours before you have to get up again, right? It's important to keep those reasonable work hours. Start on time, end on time. Shut it down. Implement that time to turn things off. Another participant in my book, she recounted how she stayed at work several times throughout the week until 7:30 p.m. sometimes preparing for observation or lesson plans. And other times she was able to get done or probably leave when things are about to be closed up or, shut down at work. But then she would get home and she would pause for a little bit, maybe get some dinner, but she got back to the work again in her bedroom, sometimes at her table, eating while she's working. And for this particular experience, she said that, her eyes became groggy sometimes. She was mentally drained, but she knew she had to get the work done. She had to get the work done. She had to grade the paper. She had to do the lesson plan. And for her, before long, she realized it was close to daylight for her in some cases, or it was a wee hours in the morning and she was still working. So you think about, where are we putting ourselves first in our self-care to make sure that we are doing the best for ourselves? Now I want you to think about this. How many of you who are viewing collaborate as another way to cope with being burnout or to avoid? Collaboration is important. If you can pause for a second, just think back. Just think. When was the last time you collaborated with fellow colleagues? Or do you have a system of support? Think about that. And if you're sitting there, standing, watching, you're thinking, well, I can't think of it. I'm not quite sure. Having that system of support, so meaningful, comes in so handy. It's so impactful because when you're going through the roller coaster of those symptoms, you're upset, you are angry, you're exhausted, sometimes talking it out, and sometimes sharing with a colleague who can understand, or even a family member. Sometimes you have to have that sounding board, right? The system of support is so impactful. Let me share with you, when I first started in this profession, not coming from a traditional pre-service education background or someone who went to college for an education major, I found very quickly that, not having a support, I'll be out there in the ocean by myself, trying to figure things out on my own. But once I was able to surround myself with other individuals in the profession that could help me weather the storm, that could jump in and could say, hey, I'll help you with that, Sharika, or hey, let me do that with you, or here's what worked for me. That went a long way for me. And I can say, oftentimes in talking to fellow colleagues and educators, they mentioned that was one reason that led to them not wanting to continue in this field, not having that collaborative support with other individuals or even from their administrator. You're able to share information, as mentioned, when you collaborate. And not only that, you have improved work performance. You get up and you're going into a work environment where things are not the best, but you still push on to enter into that environment, and your job performance and satisfaction may still be there because you have that collaborative support, and that leads to success. Impactful. So how do you go about this? I want you to follow along with me for a little bit as I get towards the closing of my presentation. In order for you to be very intentional and practical about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what you're sensing, if I may say so, you have to notice that you are burned out. And not only that, name it. What's causing you to be burned out? What is that factor? Is it the workload? Is it your interaction with your colleagues? Is it your interaction with your supervisors? What are those factors? Name it. In order for you to make a change, you have to know what is a problem, right? What you need to work on. Like setting a goal. You have to know what you need to work on. Notice it, name it. Then acknowledge. Yes, I'm being burned out. Yes, this is causing me to be burned out. This is affecting me emotionally. And when it affects me, this is how I feel or think mentally, physically. You have to notice, name it, acknowledge it, put a pin on it, and assess how these feelings affect you and your behavior, your interaction. And then from there, that's where you develop a plan as to how to resolve it. Your self-care, I mentioned that earlier, your collaboration, leaving work at work, being able to say, no, I'm not able to do this right now. I can take on this task when I'm finished with this one. It is okay. It is okay to say no. Don't get me wrong. You may not be able to say no all the time. I get it. I'm not unrealistic, but being able to identify when you need to say no or not right now is important. When you think about a bridge, and I want to see yourself on this, yourself in this image. Your experiences of burnout, how you're feeling, what you're going through. Are you on the left where it's just so rough and just so rugged and so tumultuous, and it's just up and down, up and down, up and down, back and forth? Or are you on the opposite side of the bridge, where you have some ups and downs, but it's not ongoing? Think about it. Where you are now with your experiences of burnout in whatever profession you're in, and where would you like to be? Where you are now, and where would you like to be? Take about 5 seconds and think about that. Where are you now, and where would you like to be in your experiences of being burnt out? You can do it. It is possible. It is possible. Burnout, it is real. It's a real phenomenon that has taken so much away from us as educators, as others who are in the health profession, such as nurses and law enforcement individuals, and others who are in the helping profession. But having the right practical steps in place can be that road to getting towards where you're able to decrease those instances, those symptoms of burnout, or to cope with them. As I wrap things up, I just quickly want to go over briefly the presentation focus this afternoon, talking about identifying those key causes of burnout. Those key causes we discussed that can lead to someone becoming burnout. And while I presented a few this afternoon, such as increased workload, decrease coworker support or administrator or supervisor support, there are other causes in your work environment, and you are able to pinpoint those causes. It could be your interaction with your students or your patients. There are other key causes out there. It could just be the work dynamics altogether, the lack of available resources that contributes to you becoming burnout. I talk about describing the negative impacts it has emotionally, physically, behaviorally, how that can impact you as an individual, those around you, those you work with and work for. And then I just shared with you some practical steps that can be implemented in order for you to avoid becoming burned out or to decrease those symptoms of burnout. So I want to pause briefly once again, just to give you the ability to reflect once again, just for you to step back, reflect. Are you a victim of burnout? I shared with you a few information topics this afternoon with regards to being burned out, but additional resource and support that you're able to tap into. As mentioned before, my book, Death by Burnout, Education's Dirty Little Secret, is on Amazon. You'll hear those true stories of educators that have experienced being burned out and being able to weather the storm. Some have left the profession, others have basically stayed in and beyond. You can also go through these websites and contact your healthcare practitioner if you are experiencing these symptoms, mentally, physically, or emotionally, in order to be able to better understand how to weather the storm. Once again, I am Dr. Sharika Dakers. You're able to connect with me, reach out to me based on these social media website or my email. Thank you once again for joining me, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your afternoon. Back to you, Dr. Dice.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Dakers. Very good. Extremely timely, and I'm quoting from here the comments in YouTube, extremely timely presentation, because of course we're experiencing burnt out from different angles. It could be maybe the pandemic, or because of that, it tripled on us with teaching and learning. And so we really need some strategies here to deal with. So a lot of people said that in comments, not many questions, but comments like, I need to be more selfish.
Yes.
And another person said also that they need to say no and mean no.
Yes.
But Dr. Dakers, can you really say no to your principal? What do you think?
You know what? So that's a good question, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to take from this angle. As someone coming new to the profession, you're new out of college, or you may be new into this profession, it may be tough. It may be tough to say no, right? And sometimes you probably can't say no. But what's also interesting is you can say no without really saying no. And that's what I mentioned earlier. You can say, I am working on this right now. I'm not able to do this right now. Or you can say, if I take this on right now, I may not be able to do it to the best of my ability. Can I take it on later on? But there are other times when you can say, honestly, right now, I cannot do this. And if you're true to yourself and you know that emotionally, physically you can, it would behoove you in your best interest to say that. And I would trust and hope that any principal or supervisor who hears that can be empathetic to understand, how much am I putting on to my employees, or my educators? Because you're not the only person. And I tell you, you say no, I'm sure there's someone else that he or she will ask. I'm almost positive, right?
Yes. So no means no, and stick to your no.
And you have to be in tune with your own self, what you're able to handle and take on. Absolutely.
Right. So there's a question here that I want to ask you. Going into summer, we experience quite a bit of burnout in terms of preparation for school. Some of our teachers didn't really understand how to plan effectively with technology. So they experience, before the burnt out, it was frustration and everything else, trying to do a whole bunch of PDs in order to be equipped sufficiently to teach with technology. And then the summer is coming. What are some things that teachers should do? You know, yes, they're going to take some time off. Yes, they're going to spend time with the family. What are some of the things that they should do in order to rejuvenate from that burnout, rejuvenate, fixing themselves back to be on total 100% ready for students in it is in September for Jamaica. So what are some of the things that they should get involved in to recover, basically, for in the summer months?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you pointed out, yes, educators are going to take time out for ourselves, but truly, if we're really true to ourselves, do we really take time to ourselves all the time? You know, come on now. Let's think about it. As an educator, I'll take a week off out of the 8 weeks I have, if that much. And you know, I'll, you know, relax or sleep in. But then once I get that extra energy, I'm back at it again. And as educators, we're back at it again because we want to make sure when we start school, we have all our I's dot, all our T's crossed. We have, you know, and we will plan the best that we can. We will plan. But truly, we can plan for things to be one way and it just doesn't happen. Right? So I would say one of the things is to connect and collaborate, because I tell you, as educators, I say for myself, I don't always reinvent the wheel, because there are times out there where others have gone through and created things that you're able to share. And that's where collaboration comes into place, right? We're able to say, hey, this is what I plan on doing. What are your thoughts? That support I talk about, that's one thing that's going to come in handy. Now, last year, the pandemic came on and our great lesson plans that we had to be put on pause. Don't reinvent the wheel, revise, right? And tap into what you have and, you know, make it better based on your dynamics, your population, to make sure what you're about to do come September, come August, you're able to do so efficiently. And just know, no matter how much you plan, things won't always be that way. It's okay to say, it's good. It's good.
Okay. It is all good, yes, and we will recover. Just don't go in the opposite direction of staying burnout.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Dakers. Really enjoyed it, and we're looking forward to having you back in the JDTAN network with one more of these presentations. And everybody, Dr. Dakers' information is on the screen at this time. If you want to take a screenshot, you know, nowadays, speaking of technology and screenshot, just swipe it away and you can reach out to her, follow her, interact with her a little bit more on social media. And also, if you want to check out her book on Amazon. Okay, everybody. There are no questions so much on here, but we really appreciate you coming on, Dr. Dakers. By the way, guys, her book, in case you're just coming on and you're coming on for the next presentation, is coming up in that one. But her book is Death by Burnout, Education's Dirty Little Secret. Death by Burnout. Okay. And you can find that on Amazon. I'm thinking you can find it elsewhere too.
Yeah, and I have a copy right here for those who can see it. It's right here. And there's a screen. There you go to find that. Thank you so much, Dr. Dice. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you too. Yes, we really appreciate you. So everybody stick around. There's another JAMINAR coming up right at this moment. It is called Reading Strategies versus Reading Skills. Okay, the difference between the two. So we're gonna take like a minute to catch our breath, and then we get into that presentation. And we do have our presenter here, Dr. Kenwood. And Dr. Kenwood is Jamaican, live abroad here in the US. So we're more than excited to have her on, okay? Just like how we're triply excited to have Dr. Dakers on with burnout, going through the whole idea of burnout and recovering from that, because it's a part of life. It is, if whether we like it or not, is a part of it. And the feeling is not good. But majority of the time we get some level of growth from these negative experiences. So we just have to take it with a positive grain of salt. Positive. Okay, we get it. So so it's 15 minutes after the hour, and we're going to move into reading strategies versus reading skills. And we have with us Dr. Paulette Kenwood. And Dr. Kenwood, she's a vibrant speaker too, just like Dr. Baker's excellent presenter. I'm gonna go through her introduction, but as far as I know, she will tell you a little bit more about herself, especially the Jamaican part of it, you know, how she grew up and where she's from. Not just the school. If everybody here understand that they call Michael College University the Michael. So she actually has gone there, and so she will tell you a little bit more about herself other than the Michael. Okay. All right. So Dr. Kenwood grew up in Kitson Town, St. Catherine. So everybody from St. Catherine probably thinking, okay, yeah, so I know that person. She graduated from the Michael University College with a diploma in primary education. She earned a bachelor's degree of science in elementary education and psychology, and a master of science in teaching and literacy, and a doctorate in educational leadership with a focus on professional learning communities for educators working in inclusive special education setting. That's a hard kill right there. That's like, wow. I'm gonna go over that because many of us really thinking, okay, can we really have inclusivity and then educational leadership in the same breath where they're not conflicting? Because we're thinking, if you are inclusive, somebody has to talk to the principal about this, you know? They might not want to be all inclusive because they have their favorites, but she has all of these under one umbrella. A doctorate in educational leadership with a focus on professional learning communities, which is what we need nowadays for educators working in inclusive special education setting. She is a reading specialist and an adjunct professor of special education. She is the president of Brooklyn Crown Heights Lions Club, New York, where she executes several reading action projects, including her annual literacy fiesta for the local communities in Brooklyn. Maybe she will extend that to Jamaica and partner with the Lions Club over there in Jamaica. She is also the Reading Action Program Committee Chair for the Lions Club of the state of New York. So we really need to touch base more, Dr. Kenwood, on these programs because we need some of those in and around Jamaica. So, and of course, they have Lions Club in Jamaica too. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then you just dive into your presentation on the difference between reading strategies and reading skills. What are they really, and how they can help us? So we might learn a few things, new stuff, you know, from this. So, Dr. Kenneth.
Yes, I am right here. Thank you, Dr.
Yes.
and JDTAN for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful project. And it has been a long time that I wanted to give back to Jamaica, and this is one of the best ways to do it. So I'm from Kitson Town. And for those of you who know Dovecot, when people ask me, where is Kitson Town? I say, follow the red dirt all the way from Dovecot until you can't see any more red dirt. So I am from Kitson Town. I am a teacher's child. My father is Leslie Oliver Hanson. He's no longer here with us. He taught for 40 years at Kitson Town All Age. And he also found the first basic school, infant school in Kitson Town. So I went to school already knowing how to read. I didn't see school as school. I saw it as the place where my father went. So, you know, when kids have their first day in school, you leave basic school and you go into primary school and you start bawling. There was no bawling for me because I was going to daddy. I just followed daddy to work. The downside to that, I had to be a good kid. I couldn't get in any fight at school, you know, like my other friends. But most of my life, all my life has been spent in teaching. My first teaching job was at Paul Mountain All Age, which is now, I think, maybe primary and junior high school, which Paul Mountain is like 5 miles from Kidston Town. And that's where I taught as a pre-trained teacher before going to the Michael, which is now Michael University. After Michael, I spent 4 years in Portland at Windsor Castle All Age, which I think by now must be a junior high school. And from after that, I moved to the United States, where this is my 23rd year working with the New York City Department of Education. Overall, I have been teaching for 35 years because I started back then in Jamaica. You could start teaching at 18, 19 as a pre-trained teacher once you have all the qualification that they're looking for. And to my Jamaican people, to my St. Catherine people, this Sunday, I wish I were where you are or just right on my mother's veranda right now, looking at the deep green, beautiful trees. And I spoke to my mother this morning and she's making curry goat, rice and peas, fried plantain, and with a little tomato and lettuce on the side. And, you know, I miss that. It's nostalgic. So today, what I want you to do is to reflect on how you were taught to read. I can't recall being taught to read really like someone sitting me down, teaching me the letters of the alphabet or teaching me how to sound words. I knew I got up one day and I was able to read, but I guess that has to do with me having a father who is a teacher. But I do remember when I went to school, most time all the reading was taught whole group. You have your reading book, you read, and you answer a few questions. And my love for delving into how to teach reading came as a result of moving to the United States and realized when the first time I was asked to teach reading, I did not have any of the skills and strategies that they use in the United States. So then I realized I had to go and do further studies. So that's what I'm going to take you through. As we talk this evening, you'll hear me refer to text. The text is anything that you're using to teach reading. The text could be clippings from the newspaper. It could be a novel. It could be cartoon. It could be a picture. Anything that you are using to teach that reading skill at the appointed time, that is referred to as the text. So without any further questions, Dr. Dice, I am going to try to share my screen and hope I do it right this time. And start. Okay. Is it on, Dr. Dice?
No, not yet.
No, not yet?
Yes.
What? Let me go back again.
Click on share.
No, I did. I hit share. No? Let me go back again. Let me hit again, share screen. Where is it? Share.
See, it's coming up.
Okay,
yes, perfect.
Right. Okay. Slide. Current slide. Okay, so let me go back a little bit, a little more. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. All right. So today we're going to be looking at reading skills and strategies. And if you have a pen, just jot this down. The reading skill is the concept that you're trying to teach the child. Whatever reading concept you're teaching at the time, that is your skill. The strategy is the method that you are using to teach that skill. So my goal this evening is to take you through a few of the skills and then the strategies that you can use to teach these skills. So remember, the strategy is what you're using to achieve that objective. So if we're doing reading comprehension this morning and you want me to look at sequencing, Sequencing is the skill that I'm learning, right? But the strategy is how you're going to help me to achieve this. Okay. So, oh, sorry about that. One of the most popular skill that is taught in the United States and elsewhere is the central idea of a text. For example, when I went to school and I sat down and read, you just read. But have you as a grown-up ever read something and then you have to go back and read it 2, 3, or 4 times to really understand what this text is about? And you can read. So can you imagine our students who are struggling readers and take several minutes just to decipher something that is there? So this is where we come in. The central idea of the text is the author's message, is what is it the author wants you to know. And in some case, it is referred to as the central idea. It can be the main idea or the central idea. It is it is something that is interchangeable. So here we go now. We're looking at cause and effect. Cause and effect is another skill that is taught. And towards the end, I'm going to take you to the strategies that you can use. So when you're looking at a cause and effect, what is the relationship between the two main characters? Instead of me just reading and regurgitating whatever I saw in the book, no, you teach your kids to analyze the text. And one way in analyzing the text is looking at the cause and effect relationship within a story. And this, you can look for signal words, which I will look at into later. Now, when you choose to do any of these skills that I'm doing, I'm presenting to you, these skills can be taught across the board, as little as pre-K through high school. But my focus today is on elementary school. And we do have to understand that within any high school system, there are kids who are still trying to learn to read. We still have struggling readers at all levels. So these skills are what you can use. Now, each skill can be taught for a week or 2 weeks. It depending on the curriculum that you have, it depending on the pace that you want to go, and it also depends on the level of your students' reading skills. If you have struggling readers, then you're not going to use an entire text. What you're going to do, you could take a piece of that text out. Just take one piece, maybe 4 sentences. Because if I'm already struggling to read and you give me a book to read, once I open the book, if a child cannot pronounce or cannot identify 5 words in a row in a sentence, then that text is just too hard for that kid. So what you do, you chunk the text. You take pieces of that text and you work with your student. Also, these skills, it's for your reading clinic, your small group instruction. Your small group should not have more than 6 students. But if you're in a school where your classroom is large, you might go to 10, but you should not go over, because the purpose of your reading clinic, the purpose of you doing reading skills and strategies is to improve struggling readers' ability to read and understand. Fact and opinion. Fact and opinion is another skill that you could teach. Fact and opinion, you just use your newspaper. The newspaper is the most awesome piece of document that you could use to teach facts and opinion. Teaching fact and opinion, you give your kids highlighters. You highlight a fact in yellow, you write an opinion in green. And when you're finished, you share with your partners in class, because we have to understand a fact is something that can be proven true, while an opinion is somebody's thoughts. And as I speak here, most of these strategies can use in fiction and nonfiction text. You just make it a little bit more livelier. You make it a little more engrossed. You make it with a little more rigor. You teach your reading lessons so that your students are not seated there and wondering, I am reading and everything looks so blurry, especially your students who have dyslexia or your students who have some form of learning disability. A large text, a text with 4 or 5 pages will just have that students just in a mode where they feel that they can't do it. So in order for you to have your students progress and enhance in reading, you have to teach using your skills and using your reading clinic. Now, your reading clinic, on the other hand, has to be aligned with all that you have been teaching for the week. For example, if you're an elementary school teacher, I know here in the United States, there are some subjects that elementary school teachers don't teach. They don't teach science, they don't teach social studies, and they might not do physical education because you have a cluster person for that. But on your ELA portion, your language art portion, every time that you sit with your students, you must take a small group of students aside and work with them on their reading skills. Now, the students that you work with on Monday, taking into consideration that you might have a class of 30 or more, the students that you did your small group interaction with on Monday shouldn't be the one that you're going to see on Tuesday. But by the end of the week, if you have students who are struggling readers, at least one day during that week, you should have spent one-to-one with those students. Now, sorry, let me go back. Sorry, come on. What's going on here? Oh my Lord. What's going on here? I'm sorry. Okay, I am having, oh no, what, okay. So making predictions. Students should make predictions before they read a story or before they even read an article. So what you do with this now, you have your students look at the text. They could look at the picture. And once they look at the picture from that text, they could predict what is going to happen. They could predict who is the main character. They could predict who is the antagonist or who is the protagonist. And making prediction has to do with background knowledge. If students don't have background knowledge, then it's going to be very hard for them to make predictions. And okay, it's going to be very hard for them to make predictions. So sometimes, given your circumstances, you have to pull out those background knowledge from your students. For example, if I am going to read a book to some of my students, and my students are much older, they're 17 through 21, sometimes what I do, I show a movie about the book first. For example, with my students that I now work with, we did the book, The Hate You Give. But what we did, we looked at the movie first. So actually going into the book, they would be able to make some predictions. They would be able to make some comparison and contrast to see if the book is the same as the story. With your little ones, you could get some pictures. If you know, sometimes you go to the stores and they have postcards or they have Christmas cards or something, depending on the story you are teaching, you could use those as a prop to make prediction, to give your students an idea of what is going to come next in the text. Visualizing. I remember as a kid growing up, I loved to read. And when I started reading books without pictures, you had to visualize. You had to think about what is happening. So what you do, you give your students that moment to probably just close their eyes. And once you close your eyes, you start with the book. Once you're going to read to your kids, especially the younger ones in, say, pre-K through 2nd grade, your infant school students, when you hold that big book up, you have your students close their eyes. And once they close their eyes, then they can start thinking, and you give them prompts. What do you think is happening there with that picture? Look at that beautiful picture. Mary's under the Nesberry tree. What do you think is going to happen? Close your eyes and visualize. Visualizing nice sweet Nesberries falling off the tree. And then you would get your students in that mode to be ready to participate in your reading. Because as I said, we have gone from those days when we sat with a book and we read and then we answer questions. You have to actively involve your students in your reading lesson. In your reading lesson has 3 components. I do, we do, you do. Whatever it is you're going to be teaching your students, you have to model it for them. If you want your students to visualize, use the skill of visualizing in a text, then you are going to have to model that for your students. And that shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Once you have modeled that for your students, then you're all going to do together. So that's the we do. You're teaching your students, you're showing them examples, you're having them working with peers, you're having them working with small group. Once you feel that your students have acquired that skill, that is when you do, and that is your assessment. And here's it. Your assessment does not have to be like when I was in school or when some of us on this JAMINAR, we were in school, where you just answer question. It could be a project. It could be a diorama. It could be that they create a different ending to the story. It could be that they write a letter to the author, telling the author that this is how I think the plot should have been. Because once a student can add a new ending to a story, that simply means that student fully understood what was taught. And that ending to the story doesn't have to be 4 or 5 pages. It could be just 2 sentences, depending on your students' needs. Because remember, you're teaching them and you are assessing daily. You're doing your observations and you're looking at your students, and you will know if, okay, maybe I could just do visualizing in 3 days, or maybe I have to take it over to next week. Because as I walk around and I listen to my student, I do my over the shoulder, where I don't say anything to my student, but what you do, you just stay there, you look over the shoulder and you listen to the student's conversation. And based on the conversation, then you would know if you have to reteach this skill. Compare and contrast. We are always comparing and contrasting. With this, you could just have 2 fruits on the table, or you could have 2 book bags, or 2 different pairs of shoes. And the student they look at what is the same and what is the difference. Once you have done that, that's when you move into your text. And when you move into your text now, your students would have gone into your text with some background knowledge. Because one thing we can never assume as educators, we can never assume that our students know what we are talking about, because we have a vast diversity of students in our classroom. You have students who might go on a vacation very often, students whose parents read to them, students who have big sisters and brothers who are helping them. And you might have students who are not exposed to all that material. So you can never assume that your students already know it. So here is it, you prepare your background knowledge, your background information. And as I said before, all your lessons should have 3 components. I do, we do, you do. I know when I went to school, it was my teacher, she did, then I had to do whatever she told me to do after. But as I said, it's a new era. Our students are more involved, they're more exposed. So we have to model whatever it is we want them to acquire after our lesson. Now, retelling and summarizing. Retelling for kids, it doesn't matter how young they are. If you read a short story to them or a short paragraph, they should be able to retell. A retell is short, it's consistent. It's the order in which students summarize the text. And this gives you an idea if your students truly comprehended what they read or not. Just as any other skill, if you're doing retelling and summarizing with your students, you have to model it first. First, you do your short story, your I do. Once you're finished with that, you show your students. You could put it on a chart paper. Now we're all doing remote learning. It is something that you could put on the whiteboard. It's something you could put on the Jamboard. It is something you could put on the collaborative board. So what you do, you model it for them. You show them what retelling is. And then after that, you could do one together as a class. And once you're finished doing that one together as a class, then you send them off independently to work. And there's some students who might not be able to do this independently, but you could scaffold this. What you could do for them, you just give them a little summary there with some words missing, and you give them a word bank and have them fill in the words, because you have to remember, all your students come to you with various background and various learning experience. And I know it's hard, but we do have to differentiate for all the students who are sitting in front of us. Because at the end of the day, what we're looking for students, when we finish the day or we finish the week, they would have acquired a skill in reading comprehension that they were struggling with before. Or even if they knew that skill, they would be doing enrichment, okay? Character analysis. So I remember as a little girl growing up, my grandmother, may her soul rest in peace, Saturday night and Friday night would be Anansi's storytelling business. And there was no picture to look at, but you could analyze that character based on all the things that you heard in that story that was being told to you. So you look, all the characters in a story, they all have different traits. And this is a fun way to teach kids how to enjoy a book. Instead of saying, who is the main character? No, have them draw a picture of what they think the main character look like. Have them look back at some of the words in the text. And from those words, they can think of, wow, this is what the main character in the story look like. They could use reference clues. They could make inference. They could just work at this in pair. Because if you have two students, one is a good writer and one is a great artist, then you'd have the artists creating that character, analyzing that character, bringing that character to life. And then there's that person who is the writer. That's the person who would be doing the writing piece. Because if I can just listen to words and create a picture of one of the character in the story, then I understood that text. I might not be able to write it, but based on my picture, I understood something that was taught to me today. Now we're going to look at a few strategies, but before I go into the strategies, let me go back again. Remember, these reading comprehension skills are what you'll be using in your reading clinic or in your small group instruction. If you have a large class, then you break that down. You break down whatever you're working on, and you divide your students in groups based on their reading needs. Now, maybe last week, I was in the group for main idea, but I did so well. So this week you would take me out of that group and you would put me maybe in a learning center where I could do a more advanced text on the computer, or I could do something on Nearpod, or I could do some writing. So I wouldn't need to be in that group again, because groups are supposed to be interchangeable. A student should not be in the apple group, the mango group, the orange group for their entire time in 4th grade or in 3rd grade. It all depends on what you are teaching and how you have assessed your students, and you know who to move from that group. And also remember, in all your reading strats that you're teaching, in all your reading skills, it starts with I do, we do, you do. Always model what you want your students to do. If you have students in your class who are special needs students, sometimes what you might have to do, you might have to write the information on a piece of paper or an index card, and you could paste it onto their desk. Because if they're like me, once you finish giving the instruction, I am going to ask you again, can you please tell me what I'm supposed to do for number 2? So you could have that on an anchor chart put up in your classroom, or an anchor chart in your Google Classroom, or if you are face-to-face, you have the instructions on cards, and you know your students who are going to call you a million times to explain. You have it simple. And your explanation when you're giving students instruction in reading or whatever you are teaching should be simple. There should not be more than 5 steps, because I'm already a struggling reader. And if I have to think about 10 different things, by the time I get to number 10, I have forgotten what number 1 was. So always remember that. So as we move into reading comprehension strategies, so remember, I took you through the skills and I took you through a few strategies that you can use to teach these skills. And some of these skills can be taught across the content area, okay? So the first one is chunking, and I spoke a little bit about chunking already. Chunking is a reading strategy that breaks down a challenging text. If you have a comprehension, a piece of reading comprehension for your students to read, and when you look at it, you realize that Dwayne and Paulette and Shakira, they're going to be so overwhelmed with all this. What you do, you take a small piece of that, and depending on your students' needs, you could make it bigger, larger font, and you give them that small piece. 1 paragraph out of the 5, 6 paragraph. That is what they're going to focus on. Hence, they will be less overwhelmed. So chunking can be used in your science class. It can be used in your social studies class. Any concept you are teaching, it doesn't matter. You have to read. So this skill is one that goes across the curriculum. So if you are teaching the main idea, these are some of the strategies that you could teach. Start with an anchor chart. And I know as a teacher who was trained in Jamaica, I had no clue at that time that it was an anchor chart. But I remember I did my student teaching at Mona Primary, and my supervisor, I had to have charts on the wall telling my students what they are learning. That's an anchor chart. And once you're finished with that anchor chart, it could be posted in your Google Classroom, or you're posting it in your face-to-face classroom. And also, the anchor chart has to be related to what you're going to be teaching. Not just a lot of pretty things up in the classroom. It has to be related to a skill or a concept that you have already taught. Now, pictures. Pictures are great. It doesn't matter if you are in early childhood or you're in high school and you're a struggling reader, pictures are great. because sometimes you might say a word to a kid or you might write a sentence, and because of whatever learning disability the student has, they're thinking, what is she talking about? That is where your picture come in. Emphasize titles. Remember, some texts have titles and subtitles. You emphasize that. You look at the first and the last sentences. You use keywords and you compare supporting details to the main idea. Because if I am going to be writing or reading about the market, my first sentence is a market, but then I can't get to the movie theater as my second sentence, because then my second sentence would not be supporting my main sentence and my main idea. Use examples and non-examples, and always prioritize information. As I said before, and this is something that I do when I'm teaching at the college, I always remind the student teachers, the teacher candidates, that you cannot give students too much information at the same time, especially students who are struggling readers. What you have to do, you have to take your time and break it down. Annotating a text. When you annotate a text, it simply means that you're reading and you're highlighting. And one thing I do, because I know I can't have my students writing in the in the textbook or in the novel, because I teach 4 classes and I'm going to be needing that book for the next class. So what I do, I'll take a page and have my student annotate in the text. When students annotate a text, they read. For struggling readers, one thing you do, you underline or highlight a word that you don't know. And you could just write that word in the margin of the text. Or if you have a little notebook, you put that word down there. If you see something that you don't understand as a struggling reader, you could put a question mark there. Because when the teacher comes next to the student, that's the time the teacher would look and say, oh, okay, Paulette, I see you have a question mark here. What is it you don't understand? And while your students are working, you are reading, unless it's sustained silent reading where you're giving them 10 to 15 minutes to read on their own, you have to be actively participating. That means you're moving around, you're doing your over the shoulder, looking at their text to see if they're actually engaged and they actually understand the text. So here's an example of an annotating anchor chart. This is something you could put up in your classroom where the students know if they understand, they put a check mark. If the word is unfamiliar, they put a circle. If they don't understand, it's a question mark. If this is an evidence that supports the main idea, they put an E. And if they're surprised, they put an exclamation mark. If it's something that they love, they put an heart for that. Now here is it. You can come up with your own symbols because you know your students more than I do, but you can come up with your own symbols. Maybe one day you're just focusing on unfamiliar word, and that's your focus for the day. Another day you might just be focusing on what the student does not understand. But remember, you cannot overwhelm your struggling readers. And these are some tools for annotating: Post-it, your pencil, your highlighters. And when when people ask me what is it I would like if I have wishes, my friends who are not teachers, my wishes are always pencils and Post-it and highlighters. So these are little things. And if you don't have any of these, that's okay. You can come up with other ways to have students annotate their text. Why should a student annotate? 1, to remember information, to reuse information in your writing. and to find meaning of a text. Now, annotating can be at any grade level. Your first graders, your kindergartners, maybe the only thing you want them to do is just circle the words that they don't know. Your fourth graders, depending on their reading skills and strat, you just want them to find the meaning of a text. But as I said before, you cannot teach all this in one lesson if your students are struggling. What should I write? An easy way to have students remember what to write is the 5W. Who, what, when, where, and why. So that gives your students a focus, this focus that, okay, so who is the main character? What happened to the main character? When did this happen? Where did this happen? Why did this happen? And sometimes this could be just 5 sentences. 5 sentences for your struggling readers. But remember, your goal is to always move your students to the next level. So if at the beginning of June, I was only writing 2 sentences, by the end of June, I should be able to write in 4, 5, or 6 with or without support. So it's always, always to take your students to the next level. Also, students write based on their opinion. Maybe I didn't like the text because I think the author had too many words in it. Maybe I didn't like the text because it was too hard for me. Now your connections. There's always connection to a text. Text to text, text to self, text to world, and text to media. So once you're reading with your kids, maybe today you're focusing on text to self, and maybe the text that you selected, the little girl got to school late and she forgot her homework. Most of your students could do a text to self with that, or it could be text to world. Barry won the 100 meters today. So the kids could think, oh yeah, I know someone who won the 100 meters. Or it could be just a connection to a movie. Ah, this looked like a cartoon that I saw. This looked like something, oh, the main character saved the day, just like how Sky in Paw Patrol saved the day. So always connect, because when students are reading things that they have no connection to, it's very hard for them to comprehend, especially if they are struggling readers. The KWL chart. The KWL chart is what I know, what I want to know, and what I learn. This you could just make for yourself. Before you read something with kids, and this is another one that is very good with your nonfiction text. If you are looking at, say you're doing social studies, and you're looking at the history of the Taínos. So what do the kids already know about the Taínos? And they don't have to fill this box. It could be 2 or 3 things that they put in the what I know box. In what I want to know, it could be just one thing that I want to know. And what I learn, sometimes you could tell them, list 3 things that you have learned. Depending on the level of your student, it could be just one thing that they learned that day. Because your goal as a reading teacher, or as a teacher in a whole, teaching reading or English language arts, is to create better readers, is to improve your students' reading skills, is to make your children and your students enjoy reading, is to make your students see reading as something that is not a struggle, as not a punishment. It is something that I want to do and that I will do. So it's how you teach it. Don't have me sitting there reading and then I am sounding out all the words, and then when I look at your face, I can see that you're frustrated. Remember, as I said before, if a student misses 5 words in a sentence, that text is too hard. You have to change that text. Sorry, let me go back. Sorry. Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Let me go back here. Back. Think aloud. Think aloud is something that we practice with the kids. That you're looking at this text and you're saying, wow, let me think aloud. Wow, I think the main character is going to be a boy, or I think the main character is angry. You verbalize as you read out loud, because we are more sophisticated. As we read, we can look and we can imagine. As we finish reading one paragraph or one page, we're sophisticated, we're good readers. We know what is going to happen next. But our students don't know how to do that. So the onus is on you to model this for them. So you begin by modeling the strategy. You introduce the text. The first thing that you do, what do I think I will learn about this topic? Do I understand what I just read? Do I have a clear picture in my head about this? What more can I do to understand this? What were the most important points in this reading? What new information did I learn? How does it fit in what I already know? I know sometimes I'm reading professional textbook, and once I'm finished reading, I have to go back and read it 2-3 times. Can you imagine your students who are struggling readers? So this is something that you model for them. You give students opportunity to practice the technique. You can read, and always, 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 you have to read the story first. If it's a novel you're teaching to your older students, you have to read that novel beforehand and think about what are some of the questions they are going to ask. Then when you read the selected passage, as a student read the same text silently, you have to stop and think, and you think it out loud for them. Some of these will be pre-selected, because one good thing to do when you have your text, you get some Post-it and you read and you put your Post-it note on each page, because on page 10, they're going to be talking about dinosaurs. So maybe that is something my students have seen on cartoon, they have read about. So that is something that we might talk about. Maybe you see a difficult word and you would use your Post-it note to tag that page. Once you tag that page and you get there, you'd already have an idea of what is it you think your students might be asking. Sometimes they might surprise you, but always, always you have to read the text before. If it's the newspaper, if you're using postcards, you have to look at them before, go through them before, analyze them before teaching. Because if you don't do that, then you won't have an idea what problems your students might face. 3-2-1 strategy. Instead of having your students just write something about what you learned, no, you start with 3 things that you found, 2 things that you found interesting, and 1 question that you still have. So right then and there, because your students are struggling readers, you focus them already, okay? They are focused. They're not going to be all over the place. So once they start reading and they're taking their notes, they're writing down their 3 things. Then after that, they're writing down their 2 things that they found interesting and 1 question that they still have. So right there, they already focus. Reading must have a focus. It can't be that here's your book, go and read and answer those questions. What is it you want me to focus on today? Maybe you want me to focus on the plot. Maybe you want me to focus on how the setting in the story changed. First, they started out in the house, but then the setting changed to the garden. Then the setting changed to the mountain. Then the setting comes back to the house. So maybe that's your focus today. Or maybe your focus is, what is the theme? Are we looking at friendship today? So always, always have your students have a focus for reading. Before you actually open the text, you have your focus. It could be on your chart paper. It could be in your Google Classroom, wherever you're currently teaching from at this point. But you let your students know the focus. You let your students know what is it you want them to achieve today. And going into the text, they would know, okay, so today we are going to try to remember two things that we found interesting in the text. So as they're reading, they're writing down things that they found interesting. So by the time you tell them, okay, lesson is finished, let us come together in our large group now and discuss, they would have already had something written down that they focus on. And always remember, if you pull your students apart to have small group instruction or reading clinic, you must bring back your class together for closing. For example, if you have some students working in the reading center, some students working in the writing center, and you're sitting with your group, at the end of that, all your students have to come back together, and then you bring them together and you have a closure to your class. Because here's it, what you don't want. You don't want your kids who you took away in a small group to feel that something was wrong with them. That's why they were in small group with you all day, and they didn't get that chance to come back with their classmate. So at all times, whenever you have after your small group, always bring back your students together. Read aloud. And let me say this, people oftentimes think that read aloud is the same as storytelling. Read aloud and storytelling are two different things. Storytelling, I'm just reading to my kids for entertainment, for enjoyment. Read aloud has a purpose. It's an instructional practice. It is where you read aloud to your students so that they know how to read. For example, how to pause, how to change their tone. What happens when you get to a comma? What happens when you get to exclamation sign? And moreover, especially I work with ENL students who are learning English as a new language. It's how you pronounce the words. So the students could be reading and they're pronouncing the word one way, but you as the teacher, once you do this to read aloud, during read aloud for them, they will say, oh, okay. And that's how it is pronounced. So it's practicing, it's teaching your students how to read aloud, because we're not just preparing students to be in the classroom with us, we're preparing future leaders. We're preparing students who are going to have to work with someone and who sometimes have to present at their job or even present at church, because in Jamaica, that's where we start our first presentation, at church. That was the first time in my life where I read aloud to so many people. So you have to practice. Now, analyzing the story. When you analyze a story, and this strategy, analyzing a story, is done during small group or whole class instruction. So this is somebody wanted, but so when. So the somebody, who is the main character? What does the main character want? But what is the problem? So how does the character try to solve the problem? How does the story end? If you give your students this as your focus, they have their paper and they're reading, they say, okay, one of the things I have to find out today is who is the main character. So that is written there, wanted. What does the main character wants? And what is the problem? And so on. So by the time the student finished following this process, at the end of this, they would have had some understanding of the story. And as I said before, there might be some students who could answer all 5, but there might be another student in the class who would only know, okay, the main character is John. And that is okay. Because remember, you are working with readers who need to be supported. And if they're not supported, they will leave school, just drop out, because reading has become a task. Reading is no longer something that I enjoy. Because one day I went to school and the only thing I could tell was the main character, and the teacher wasn't pleased with that. So remember, we celebrate our students. Students are celebrated at all time. One of to me, the easiest skill that children learn is sequencing. Sequencing is everyday activity. That's the strategy that you use. Students could have a sequence page, or they could tell the things that they do when they get up in the morning. The first thing I do, my mother wakes me, if I'm a little kindergartner, she tells me I have to go brush my teeth. After I finish brushing my teeth, I have my breakfast. After I have my breakfast, and all those things are sequencing. Authors write in sequence. Stories happen in sequence. So why not just start with the main things that children know? You could have the 4 large squares. In square 1, they put whatever they did first this morning. In square 2, second. In square 3, third, and so on. Then you transfer from that to the text. What happened first in the text goes in box 1. What happened second goes in box 2. What happens second goes in box 3, and so on. Okay. Now, one thing you could find, and they still do calendars. They still do. So you get an old calendar and you cut or tear out the pages, and you could, for your little ones, you mix up the month of the year. This could be on a desk. This could be if you have a mat on the floor, and then they have to put the months of the year in order. Which month goes first? Which month comes last? Little things like that. You don't have to spend any money here as teachers, because I know we spend all the salary that we make. Half of the time, we spend it back on the students. However, this is something that is right there with you. Okay. And the sequencing map is the beginning, the middle, and the end of a story. So let me close out. Let me say again, remember, as I stated before, the skill is the concept that you are teaching your student. The strategy is the method that you're using to teach that concept. Remember, when you teach your students to read, it's I do, we do, you do. And it doesn't matter which subject you are teaching, it's I do, we do. Remember to make reading exciting. Remember to make reading something that your students want to do and not seeing it as a torture. Remember, all your students come to you knowing something. And always remember, you start to work with your students based on their background knowledge. Thank you for listening to me. And I do hope that I left you with some skills and strats that you'll be able to use in the classroom with your students. Go and enjoy your rice and peas. Save some for me, because I know my mother done eat already.
Thank you, Dr. Kenwood. It's very good. I was just sitting right here thinking, oh my God, it's so much, that we can implement in reading. And I was even thinking, because I'm science and math, it's not just reading in reading language arts, but also you can bring these across the science too, because you need the reading strategies in science and in math for word problems as well. So that's very, very good. Do you have anything to say about like subject?
Cross curriculum?
Yes.
So one thing as a reading specialist, what we do practice in my program where I work, we meet all the other teachers. So I meet with the science teacher, the social studies teacher, the math teacher, and we look across the board at the students who are struggling. So whatever struggles that is happening in those class, it is shared. And then we go about planning. Because if you can't understand a reading comprehension text, you will not be able to understand a science text. So sometimes what we do, we work with the science teacher. So I would suggest to the science teacher, what are the vocabulary that you're going to be seeing this week? So you're teaching H2O, you're teaching photosynthesis. I have these students for reading. These are words that they would not be able to identify during reading. So what you need to do, you start with your vocabulary, and it goes in social studies too. Across, even in mathematics, okay, I'm going to be teaching mean. Mean is the same thing as average. I'm teaching medium, I'm teaching mode. So these are some of the vocabulary words that you're going to work on with your students across the curriculum, because reading doesn't stand alone. Across and one thing my school district practice, I'm in District 79, is reading across the content area.
Okay, that's very, very good. And as we talk about reading across subject areas, we also look at how we teach within the subject. So if you're teaching reading, you look at the strategies teaching reading skills. How many you think is the sweet spot for one lesson if you're teaching a reading skill? How many strategies would you think is a nice?
One strategy, one strategy. Because remember, the students are struggling readers already. That's one strategy, and you use that strategy for a week. If at the end of the week they didn't get it, then you could repeat it, or you could leave it, go to something else, but you know you have to come back to it. One strat per week, one skill per week. Yeah. Okay.
And do you encourage, how you have whole group lesson and then they break off into small groups and one-on-one and so on? Do you encourage teachers to teach the one strategy in whole group and then meet students in small group per that week with the same strategy? Or should you have like a whole group strategy, and then when you say, oh, we're going to break off in our groups now, then you have their strategy working on for that week?
No, it's a one strategy. Say, for example, I'm teaching sequencing. So I do my large group with sequencing, but I know Shakira, Kimon, and Dwayne didn't get it. I'm going to take those three aside and we're going to work in our clinic. But the other students would be working independently on the same sequencing skill. So everybody, and that's the thing with special education, that people think that because I have a learning disability, everybody should be reading 5 pages, but because I have a special need, you give me something to color. No, what happens there? The entire class is reading 5 pages, but because of my dyslexia, I'm reading half of a page. You blow the words up bigger for me, and you also give me highlighters, but I'm working on the same skill, because at the end of the day is to take that student who is not reading on grade level to make sure that student get on or close to grade level as you possibly can.
Okay, very good. Very, very good. All right, so we don't really have questions so much, and it's just that you have quite a lot of people, hundreds, saying that you're awesome, wonderful.
Thank you.
Some people say that your presentation is captivating and they enjoyed it quite a bit. And somebody said that when it's sweet, it just done.
I hear it. I'm gonna be a little biased now. It's because I'm going Michael, because it's because I got to the Michael.
Yes.
The country girl went to school in Kingston.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find, somebody said that, you're a very good batchmate of yours. I can't really figure the name out now. Oh yes, Jean Adman,
that's my classmate from Michael.
Yes,
We spent 3 years in classes together.
Yeah, she said, thank you, Doc. Great presentation, batchmate. So I wanted to highlight that.
That's my batchie. That's my classmate. We took every us together for 3 years at Michael. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Oh
yes.
my gosh.
Oh boy, I enjoyed this evening. Very well put together. Thank you so much, Dr. Kenwood. We're gonna talk a little bit more later on because they need to come back, especially when over the summer.
Yes,
And
definitely.
yeah,
Definitely.
they need to.
I want to
Mm.
do something on special education though. Assistive
Yes,
devices, assistive
yeah.
technology in special education.
Mhm.
Really want to do something on that.
Yeah, that would be a very good one. And I want to, yeah, to highlight your background with special ed because in the Caribbean, they don't get a lot of focus on special education.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very much lacking the documentation and you know the strategies that can be used and even the implementation, practical
Yeah.
strategies that you can put in place and actually observe teachers going
Right.
through these strategies in order to make change with special education students.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it's welcoming. It's very much welcoming with your
Yeah.
background in that way. So very good. I want you to share. Do you have your contact information that you want to put up? And I'm hoping that.
No, I guess you're gonna have to do that because I
All
didn't
right.
on my slide.
Okay.
Could
Yeah,
put it up. Yeah, you
we'll
could
send
share
it
it.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna send it
Share it
out
out.
in the reminders that they're on.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
videos are on our
Yeah.
YouTube channel, JDTAN YouTube
Oh,
channel.
okay.
Yeah, and so they're for everybody who is wondering how will we watch these videos again? They're on YouTube, so you can go on JDTAN TV, which is on YouTube, and you can watch these over and over and over again. You can even pull them up in PDs for teachers at your schools, and also if you're in small group, if you're meeting on a afternoon or any weekend days or anything, you can just pull it up and talk to your colleagues about it. It's a very, very good talking points that you can build on if you're planning lessons and so on.
Might I say something, Dr.
Oh yes,
Dutch?
certainly, yes, yes.
What they need to do is to start creating professional learning communities.
Mhm.
Because what we tend to do sometimes as teachers, we tend to stay in our own little room with our doors locked. But once you open that door and start meeting with your classmates, your colleagues, especially if you share the same students, and professional learning community doesn't have to be a 3-hour, 4-hour thing. It could be just a 40 minutes once a week that you sit down and share strategies.
Yes.
Very good thing to start with, yes.
That's very true, very true. In January of this year, I wrote an article about building international learning communities because the pandemic really, apart from, you know, people dying and everything else, sickness and so on, that is horrible. It's very horrible. The other side of it is that it opens up the avenues for all of us who remain here to build international learning communities and share strategies right across the globe. It really opens up that part. So yeah. Everyone, you know where to find us. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Dickers as well for the wonderful presentation earlier on burnout. If you want to see that one, you can scroll back through our video today and you can watch the first part of this video. And then of course, Dr. Kenwood just finished with reading strategies versus reading skills. And you need to know the difference, okay? Check out our resources on jdtan.org and also pay attention to your emails, everybody, for JAMINARS when they're coming up. Hey, guess what? There is the second part in the series, School Improvement Plan. It's coming up around June 20th. So pay attention to the notification coming out for the School Improvement Plan. So we have 2 more sessions to go. Session 1 was completed already with gathering school information and data. And so we have session 2 coming up and then session 3. So we have quite a bit to talk about with middle managers and senior teachers and principals and assistant principals, where planning school improvement is involved, okay? We also have our annual education summit that is coming up from the Education Task Force, and that is a 3-day summit for all of us who were here online last year. This year is gonna be bigger and better, seriously. we're in planning mode right now. And the date that is set for the Education Summit is June 29th, 30, and July 1st. So that's a 3-day summit. Stay tuned for that. We have 3 days filled with quite a lot of resources for everybody, including myself as well, because I'm still learning. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for staying on and for your undivided attention. You know, it really pays when you come on and you make this your home for learning. It's really cool. And we also learn from you. So if you don't mind, if you want to drop comments in the chat or send us your emails about our presentations and also the things that you see that we could do better about in our diaspora, then that will be very, very helpful for all of us, okay? And as we move forward, just keep everybody else in mind that that are struggling. If you can reach out to help somebody, you know, don't count it as being or doing too much for anybody, okay? Because we're all in the pickle together, you know? All right, everybody, take care and thank you for coming on. We will hear from you and you will hear from us soon, okay? Take care, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye, Dr. Kenwood. Bye, Dr.
Bye,
Dice.
Dr. Dakers.
It was great. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed yours. You should see me here testing out my shoulder when you're talking. Because I'm so stressed out.
Oh my gosh, we definitely need to stay in touch.
I'm so stressed out. Yes, we will. Yeah.
Kind of a great work, awesome presentation. I am going to.
You did too. Awesome. I enjoyed yours too.
Once I get information from Dr. Dice, I'm going to share the link on my Facebook platform. I have a platform on there.
Okay.
And then once I get information, I'll connect your information to that. So they're aware how to reach out to you just for further information or collaboration.
All right. Thank you.
So I'll check back on the YouTube link to see your information. Then we can go from there.
All right.
Are you on Facebook?
Yes, I am.
Okay, what's your name on Facebook? I'm gonna
call it Kenwood, but I think if you're not, are you friends with Suko Elliott, Suko Ekwesi?
Yes, he was my teacher.
Yeah, once you said Albert Town, I said she gotta be Suko teacher. He was my
Mr. Elliott. Oh my gosh.
Suko. So then you can send me friend requests because I fix on Facebook that only friends of friends can send me.
Okay, so all right, so I should